and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Coming up on today's program, in the wake of the tragedy in Las Vegas, there's renewed debate over gun control. We'll look at whether gun laws can and should be changed. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court kicked off a new term Monday. They'll be deciding cases with lasting impact on immigration, data privacy, and First Amendment rights. And finally, we will visit the coolest museum in San Francisco, dedicated to something sweet. But first, we go to Las Vegas. It's been 5 days since the horrific mass shooting at a country music festival there. At least 58 people were killed and about 500 injured before shooter Stephen Paddock took his own life. He had opened fire from his hotel room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Casino Hotel. While authorities are still searching for a motive, the community is left picking up the pieces. More than half of all the victims who died were from California. We'll discuss the intensifying debate over gun control in just a moment. But first, let's get an update on the latest from Las Vegas. And joining me now from the public radio station KNPR in Las Vegas is senior producer Joe Schoenmann. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
This has all been so tragic and troubling, but perhaps the biggest question now is why did Stephen Paddock carry out this massacre? Based on the clues that investigators have been able to gather so far, are they any closer to finding that answer?
Yeah, I don't think they really are. From people I know within Metro, within the police department, they say there has been some word from the sheriff who said they thought maybe there was an accomplice. The FBI immediately walked that back. They do have in their possession all of the computer equipment that Mr. Paddock had. However, he's 64 years old. He lived in a retirement community. There is not a big expectation they're going to find a lot when they do a forensic analysis of the data because he was not a social media user. He doesn't have the sort of tracks that you and I might leave on social media. There just was not a lot there.
What about the note that was found in the hotel room? I know it wasn't a manifesto or a suicide note, so what was it?
Again, they're not releasing what that note was. There's speculation. It might have been a note to his girlfriend because he did, as a lot of people now know, wire $100,000 to the Philippines, which is where his girlfriend, maybe his ex-girlfriend, lived. And she has been flown back to the United States and questioned in Los Angeles by the FBI. To date, the FBI says there's nothing incriminating in what she has told them. So it's really, as to a motive, which, as you correctly surmise, is the huge question, there's just nothing yet.
Joe, you've been covering this story all week. You have lived in Las Vegas for 20 years. How would you describe the mood in Las Vegas right now?
I would say it's very somber. You don't see this a lot in Las Vegas. Look, none of us live on the Strip. Some people do work there, but we live regular lives. There is an excitement in this town all the time, though. But I gauge how the town feels by how they drive. This is a car culture. People drive everywhere. And after 9/11, for instance, people were kind on the highway. They let you cut them off if you did. It was the same way Monday after the shooting. People, and I treat that not really to kindness as much as being sort of in shock. And I felt that this entire week.
Is there an element of fear as well? Because now we're seeing some reports come out that Stephen Paddock had scouted other locations, Fenway Park in Boston, Lollapalooza in Chicago. Is there a sense of fear of being in places that have crowds in Vegas?
And again, even a week or 2 weeks before this, there was Ogden, a high-rise in downtown Las Vegas, that he had tried to get condominiums on the top floor overlooking the festival grounds. I think there is a fear. I don't think people who think about going to festivals would probably go to them immediately right away. As you know, time sort of heals some of the thoughts. It doesn't heal wounds, but people will get by that. And there's a push in this town anyways to get beyond it and not to let it affect their lives.
And also on the subject of healing, I have to ask you about the victims and the people who were wounded, hundreds of them. How many are still in the hospital? What's the nature of their injuries? Because if they're still in the hospital at this point, it must be very serious, some of the most serious wounds.
There are still dozens of people in the hospital critically wounded. Their hospital bills are going to be enormous. There has been a fund set up which has raised about $10 million to date. The costs are going to be astronomical. You're right. It's hard to say. All I know is there are a lot of people who are attached to so many people at this festival, from California especially, but from around the globe. we're just hoping for the best for all of them.
And I think it strikes at the heart of everyone, right? This could have been your child. You have a family in Vegas. We all go to concerts. We go to places with crowds. Is there a heightened sense of security in Vegas right now?
I don't sense the heightened sense of security. You do see within Mandalay Bay, for instance, nobody there on the casino floor. We had sent a reporter there yesterday. I would never let my kid, I'll be honest, go to an outdoor festival. He's in his teens. And I'll admit, Tuesday morning when I was driving to work, just thinking about some of the people I'd talked to, I teared up in my car. This is very early in the morning. I really can't explain why. I see that happening, though, all over the place, in coffee shops, grocery stores. It's really, I'll never think the same way about a disaster in another part of the world again. I'll be much more affected by it.
Well, this certainly has been a sad week for everyone, and I know certainly for all the people of Las Vegas as well. Joe Schoenmann with public radio station KNPR, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Sunday's tragedy is the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history, and it's reigniting a national debate over gun laws. On Thursday, the NRA said it supports a federal review of bump stocks, devices that make a semi-automatic weapon fire more like an automatic one. California has some of the toughest gun control laws in the nation, due partly to its own history of gun violence. In 1989, 5 children were killed in a Stockton schoolyard by a mentally ill man armed with an AK-47. That led California to approve the nation's first ban on the sale of military-style assault weapons. In 1993, a gunman at a San Francisco law firm shot 8 people dead before killing himself. Senator Dianne Feinstein successfully pushed for passage of the federal assault weapons ban. It expired in 2004. In 2015, a terrorist attack in San Bernardino left 14 people dead. In response, state lawmakers passed 6 gun control bills, including a ban on large-capacity ammunition magazines. Joining me now to discuss all of this further are Allison Anderman, managing attorney at the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, and Lois Beckett, a senior reporter with The Guardian. She joins us from New York City via Skype. Welcome to you both. And so, Allison, I want to begin with you. What impact has California's gun laws had on homicide and suicide rates?
You mentioned the 101 California massacre. My organization was founded in response to that massacre by a group of lawyers. And since then, in the past 25 years, we have been working to pass effective evidence-based gun laws at the local and state level. And what we have seen in that period is a 63% drop in the gun homicide rate and a 46% drop in the gun suicide rate.
So that's evidence that you think that stricter gun laws work.
Absolutely.
And Lois, are there other approaches particular to California, maybe it's regarding social services or economic equity, that also play into this, contributing to the drop in homicide rates?
There are. In both Richmond and Oakland, communities have taken more data-driven methods, realizing that actually the risk of violence is concentrated in very small networks of people. And if you intervene with them ahead of time, you can change their risk of doing violence, change that behavior, and actually support people. So in Richmond, using the Office of Neighborhood Safety, did leadership programs for young men they thought were likely to commit or be a victim of homicide, and murders dropped. Oakland has done a slightly different model, but again, focused on community and focused on legitimacy, and not just criminalizing people, but making neighborhoods safer. And so along with gun laws, advocates in neighborhoods want both. They're really finding ways to reduce murders even more.
And I want to also talk about what's happening on the national scene. We have a situation now where Republican lawmakers in Washington have for decades rejected gun restrictions, but now there seems to be support growing for regulating bump stock devices. Senator Feinstein has also proposed a ban on these devices. Do you think that this is possibly the beginning of a breakthrough on stricter gun laws at the federal level? Lois?
You have, this would be the smallest possible step forward for gun control. It's really important to remember that bump stocks might seem like a serious military thing. They're not. They were a weird toy for gun geeks. until Sunday night when they were used in a horrific attack. And so a lot of people, even gun aficionados, had no idea what they were. So the bar for regulating them strictly or banning them is pretty low. And if we see the NRA get on board with at least restricting them, it's because, as the NRA's chief lobbyist said, not that many people even own these. It's not that hard of a fight.
So then, Allison, how significant is this step that the NRA is taking then, saying, oh yeah, the ATF should take a look at whether bump stocks should be regulated?
Well, I think that any time the NRA gets on board with a gun safety restriction, it's noteworthy. That said, and I agree with Lois that these are not accessories that are in wide use. They probably don't occupy a large market share, which is why the NRA is supporting potential restrictions. But I do think that bump stocks are signify a larger problem that we have with the gun industry, which is that they are marketing these increasingly dangerous types of militarized accessories, and it is the combination of the bump stock with a large capacity ammunition magazine that made the death toll so catastrophic in Las Vegas.
And when mass shootings like this happen, and we see the resistance to stricter gun laws, a lot of people pin it on the NRA, partly, you know, that the NRA is so powerful and keeps on lobbying against all this. So, Allison, why is the NRA so powerful? It certainly gives a lot of money to politicians, Lois, rather, but what sets them apart? Because a lot of special interest groups give money to politicians. What makes the NRA more powerful than those groups?
Well, the NRA has a 5 million member grassroots network across the country, and they have, more importantly than those big numbers, a lot of dedicated activists in each state who are very passionate, very informed, willing to show up, willing to call. They know how to pull the levers of democracy. And if you have a small group of organized people, you can get very far, even if there's a majority with vague feelings who's not, you know, who disapproves but isn't really willing to show up to stop you.
So we have a conversation now about bump stocks, and they're just one set of small devices. So then how do we construct a larger conversation with new language around gun laws that will actually get somewhere, Allison?
Well, I think language is important, but I also do put this on legislators and ask them to have the courage to stand up to the gun lobby, because they are not representing the will of their constituents. We know that over 90% of Americans support universal background checks, and federal legislators repeatedly fail to enact these laws, and the NRA works tirelessly to defeat them. And this similar case in many other specific gun violence prevention policies. We have overwhelming support from the American people, and what stands in the way between the American people and these laws is the legislators.
Allison, there are more than 300 million firearms in this country. Lois, rather, I'm turning to Lois now, and that's just about enough weapons for every single person in America. So even if you have new legislation banning the sale of new weapons, what do you do about the existing ones?
So there are obviously other countries who made different choices, like Australia, which decided to have mandatory buybacks, basically confiscating about a third of the country's gun stock and melting down nearly 1 million weapons. That's what Australia did. It's really unlikely that the United States would do that. So when someone says, but why can't we be like Australia, say, well, we're not willing to melt down 90 million guns, so that we're not going to do that. But there's a new line of gun control laws or gun violence prevention laws that are focused on America as it is. And they're not saying, how do we ban whole categories of people? We're not saying how we ban whole categories of guns. You're saying most of the time people can have guns and be safe. There are just these moments where they're at very high risk and having a gun turns into something deadly for them and everyone around them. And so one of the most interesting developments on the state level is these extreme risk protection orders, which give family members and loved ones and police officers the ability to petition a court to have someone's guns taken away temporarily. And that's something that is much more flexible, it's short term, and it's about lining up the law alongside risk, which is not something that is just you're a risky person or not over your life, it changes.
Do you want to add to that, Allison?
I completely agree with Lois and want to add that a similar law, similar to the extreme risk protection order in Connecticut, has been studied by researchers from Duke University, and they showed that these laws have the potential to reduce suicides and to actually prevent gun suicides. And you have to keep in mind that America's epidemic of gun violence really has a lot to do with suicide. Over 2/3 of the gun deaths in this country each year are due to suicide. Suicides are not inevitable, and they are preventable. unacceptable. So I agree that extreme risk protection orders are a very good direction to go in.
And you both seem to be saying that we need a much more holistic approach as well. So Allison Anderman and Lois Beckett, thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Turning now to the Supreme Court's new term, the justices will tackle data privacy and a case that pits a gay couple against a wedding cake baker. Plus, the court is considering whether undocumented immigrants can be detained indefinitely without a hearing. Joining me to discuss all of this is UC Hastings law professor Rory Little. Professor Little, nice to have you back on.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So a very full docket. The new term began on Monday. A lot of the cases are significant for California. Let's begin with a case that involves issues of religious freedom, freedom of speech, LGBT rights. That's the Colorado cake case. What will the justices be looking at in that case?
Well, that's a very big case because a lot of governments, including ours here in the Bay Area, have anti-discrimination laws based on sexual orientation, among other things. They're looking at whether somebody can first have a religious objection to complying with that non-discrimination law.
And this is a baker that said he was not going to bake a wedding cake for this gay couple because it violated his religious beliefs.
Yeah, it was a very quick exchange. They just walked in and said, we'd like a wedding cake. The mother was there, and the baker said, well, I don't do gay weddings, and they left. So there was no discussion of his free expression. His claim now is, you're going to compel me to make a cake for something I don't believe in. That violates my freedom of religion and my freedom of expression. There's not much record to support that, actually.
And we have a big LGBT population here in the Bay Area. If for some reason there's a ruling in favor of the plaintiff, the baker in this case, what would be the implications for businesses that serve that population here and elsewhere?
Well, the problem here is that you can't really examine somebody's assertion of religious belief. And this used to be an objection to racial discrimination. They would say, well, we can't serve races because of our religion. And we have so far said, no, that doesn't overcome the anti-discrimination principle of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So this could really give businesses an out in lots of ways that would further bias.
Another case that's being closely watched involves immigration. And as you know, on Thursday, California became the country's first sanctuary state. So immigration advocates are surely watching this other case before the court. And this is the question of whether the government can detain undocumented immigrants indefinitely without a hearing. They heard arguments Tuesday. What's at stake here?
Yeah, boy, that's a very big case, too. The argument that you can hold a human being in detention without any kind of justification or hearing for a long time really is disturbing under the Constitution. The claim here by the government is when somebody is not a citizen, they are undocumented, they are seeking admission, they're here, but they're seeking admission, technically, they can be detained just on it for anything, not even a hearing. So the question in this case isn't should these people be released, it's just should they get a hearing before they're detained.
And there's another case that really touches everybody because we all have cell phones now, right? And this is a case that involves how our personal data is used. And it involves a man who was convicted of robberies, partly based on records provided by his cell phone company without a warrant. So what implications would this have for all of us?
Right. This is another case that could be very major. We all share data with third-party providers in our social media. We sign those terms of agreement. We don't read them. And we don't really believe that data is instantly available to the government. And it's very private data sometimes. So the question here is, when you have, quote, shared that data with somebody, because you have to have a phone, you have to have a Facebook account, does that allow the government to get that private data and put it all together without even a search warrant, without any judicial oversight? Another big case, because in the past the court has said you share it with somebody, you lose your privacy interest. We don't really believe that in our hearts. We don't feel that way. So a big case for the Fourth Amendment.
Another big case, union dues, right? This came up before when Justice Scalia was alive, but then there was a 4-4 ruling, and then it kind of got dismissed, and now it's back.
Yeah, this union dues case, everyone thought it would go against the unions. This is whether a union can require everybody in the union to pay their dues because they're negotiating for fair practices for everybody, even if a member doesn't want to pay the dues, they say they don't like the union, let's say. You're required to join the union in a lot of employers. If they can't collect dues from everyone, this could really hurt the unions. The California case 2 terms ago was dismissed because Scalia died unexpectedly, and now they've granted another case from a different state on the same issue. And unless Justice Gorsuch votes in a way that surprises us, probably going to go against the unions.
And lots of unions are watching this. The teachers union, for example,
the teachers
many
union in California is very concerned about this.
Yeah. Another case, real quickly, the travel ban, right? There were these challenges that were going to be heard. The court is now putting that on hold. Does the latest travel ban that President Trump came out with, 3.0, does that render the prior challenges moot? Well,
that's the question. There's a lawsuit now filed against Travel Ban 3, and the claim is this moots the prior case. There's a really big issue here, which is if it does moot that case, if they have to dismiss it, should they vacate the decisions below? They really shouldn't vacate those decisions because, of course, it's the government's decision to moot this case. They didn't have to do it. So those lower court decisions are very important decisions, statutory decisions, constitutional decisions. To vacate them can really... It would be too bad, in a sense, for all the litigation around this area.
And we only have about 30 seconds remaining, but can you touch real quickly on Justice Gorsuch? This is his first full term. Do you expect that he will be more conservative than Justice Scalia?
You never know, and he's shown that he's very confident. And his votes at the end of last term were very conservative. So far, I think he's trying to moderate his oral argument views, but we'll know when he votes in these cases.
All right. UC Hastings law professor, a lot to cover and a lot to watch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a tough week for all of us, so we thought we would round out the week with something sweet, ice cream. There's now a traveling museum devoted to it. KQED's Shiraz Sadiq has the scoop.
We wanted to create a space that brought people together. This is a space that is unifying, it's a safe space, it's empowering, and ice cream is such a beloved treat that it just felt like the perfect combination.
This isn't your typical museum where the artwork is behind plates of glass. Here the artwork is meant to be touched, interacted with. Why did you take such an unconventional approach to the design of your museum?
Well, I find that museums can be a little bit isolating, right? There's this sense that you can't touch anything or you're going to break something. And I think when you have that level of degree of constriction, it limits people from truly being able to express themselves. So we wanted to create a space where people could really be their authentic selves. They could laugh, they could have fun, they could touch something and nothing would break. It's flipping this concept of the traditional museum on its head.
It's also a museum that's tailor-made for millennials and their love of Snapchat and Instagram. How did social media influence your design aesthetics and your choices?
It wasn't so much Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook that led the aesthetic design behind this, more so this sense of capturing the moment and what could we do from a design perspective that really allowed people to transport back. And we feel that the more visual the space is, the more people are able to do so.
The Museum of Ice Cream features 9 different themed rooms, including a gummy bear garden, rock candy cave, and the main attraction, a swimming pool filled with plastic sprinkles.
Raining sprinkles! There's just something so therapeutic, and really, we made sure they would look as real as they do. They look like real sprinkles.
How many sprinkles are in this thing, roughly
100
speaking?
million sprinkles.
Wow.
After using an air hose to remove all the sprinkles sticking to my clothes, Madison took me to meet Grant, a gold-horned unicorn standing tall in a field of rainbows.
My favorite room here is our rainbow room. It's an homage to San Francisco for the pride and inclusivity and diversity that this city has fostered and created for its entire existence. Inclusivity and making sure that all people feel safe and protected in this space is a huge mission statement of ours and something that we strongly value.
Thank you.
Dipped in real majesty.
But no trip to a museum for ice cream would be complete without delicious reminders of why this timeless treat never goes out of style, even after a makeover from millennials.
All right, welcome to Mary's Diner.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've like stepped into a 50s diner.
Yeah, exactly. That's the intention behind it. So it's also our Scoop of the Month room.
What you have in front of you here is ginger snap flavored ice cream, with a gingerbread crumble on top with some sprinkles, and then we're gonna add this lovely strawberry basil sauce.
We want to make sure that the city feels that we are working in collaboration with ice cream creameries that have been around for a while. So each month we have a ice cream shop from San Francisco that's created a unique flavor that you can only get at the Museum of Ice Cream.
That is the bomb.
That's the answer we want. Yeah.
At the Museum of Ice Cream, you won't encounter artwork that's overtly political, but you can still express your opinion, even a political one, in the message statement room.
We wanted to create a space where people could take their emotions and how they felt and make a statement on the walls. We believe that this is an equalizing space. This is an opportunity for you to feel your authentic self. And if you have something to say that maybe is political or maybe is socially oriented, feel free to say it.
Madison, what does ice cream mean to you? What memories does it evoke?
When I think about it, it just brings me back to my childhood. I think of being a kid and sitting in my house and hearing the ice cream truck go off and the excitement and exhilaration I got from running outside and catching that truck to get my ice cream. I also associate it with my first memories of having autonomy. I remember my parents being like, here's $5, go out and get the ice cream by yourself. There's just something with that level of independence I just greatly associate with ice cream.
Maybe our universal love for ice cream springs from memories of what it was like to be a kid when your toughest decision was deciding what kind of scoop to get. Or maybe it's because we associate sharing a cone with friends and family in times of celebration, just as Tisha Daniel and her family were doing when I caught up with them at the museum.
I love it. It's phenomenal. It's more than I ever imagined. We're celebrating my daughter's first birthday today, and so I'm excited to show her these pictures when she grows up and let her know that you went to a place that not everybody gets to go to. I think ice cream brings happiness. Like, who eats ice cream and is sad? You ready? It's fun, whether it's soft serve or, out of a tub or whatever. It's fun. Feels good.
We have people from cultures from all over the world who are coming together and talking with somebody they probably never would have had the opportunity to speak with. And they're talking about ice cream and they're having fun. When you see the power of human connection in such a simplified form, I think it can be a great example of how we should move forward as a country.
The Museum of Ice Cream is at 1 Grant Avenue in San Francisco. It runs through February. Tickets are currently sold out, but you can follow them on Instagram to find out when more tickets may go on sale. For more of our coverage, please go to kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.